giliw, kailan sa silangan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang linirang, tuyag na ng magiting, sa panlulupig, di ka pasisi, sa dagat at bundok, sa simayang, sa langit bumaba, Manila ang tulad, awit sa kanayang minamahal, ang kisap ng watawat ko'y tagumpay na nagdirinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilid, lumarang araw na wal ating pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo, aming ligaya na pag may nakapit, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
You may now take your seats. Again, good afternoon to our students, faculty members, administrators, and beloved guests. It is our greatest honor to welcome you all to a very special event. All of us at Benilde Architecture appreciate your presence and thank you for taking the time to be with us here. I'm Architect Janelle Samonte and I will be your host for today. I, for one, am excited to listen to the presentation we have slated this afternoon. But before we proceed to our program proper, let us call on first the Dean of the School of Environment and Design. Please give a round of applause to Architect Harvey Vasquez, who will be giving us his welcome address.
Wow, I've never seen this theater this full. So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to acknowledge our mentors that are here, our friends in the industry. Design Center Philippines is also here. We do have some friends in the media as well. It is with great pleasure and anticipation that we welcome you today for a lecture featuring our distinguished guest, Chris Van Duijn, the Executive Director of OMA. As we all know, OMA is a global practice operating and spanning the traditional boundaries of architecture and urbanism. As one of the trailblazers in architecture education here in the Philippines, we take pride in hosting international practices as part of our mission to widen our students' perspectives in architecture and design. So, I'm seeing a lot of mentors and students this afternoon, and we all, I think, follow closely projects and research of OMA, and we are glad to welcome them into our campus this afternoon. We would also like to thank Send and Receive for helping us realize this event, and of course Sir Carlo Martinez for connecting us with OMA. And we are hoping for a fruitful discussion after the lecture, so please be ready with your questions. I know our students are not shy in terms of questions. So Chris, I hope you're ready. And without further ado, let's all start the program.
Thank you, Dean Harvey, for that insightful message. Now I know all of us are curious and excited to meet one of the prominent figures in design and architecture. It's not an exaggeration to say that we're extremely privileged to be joined by a highly respected professional who has graced us with his time and expertise. I am, of course, talking about Chris Van Dam. Chris Van Dam has been a partner at OMA since 2014 and leads OMA's work in Asia. He joined the practice in 1996 and has been involved in OMA's most renowned projects, such as Universal Studios in Los Angeles, the Prada stores in New York and LA, Casa de Musica in Porto, CCTV headquarters in Beijing, and the Prada Transformer in Seoul. His recently completed projects are Hanwha Galleria department store in Seoul, MEETT Toulouse Exhibition and Convention Center, Axel Springer Campus in Berlin, the extension of Beijing UCCA Center for Contemporary Art, Genesis Gangnam Car Dealership in Seoul, Prada Foundation in Milan, the Bibliothèque Alexis de Tocqueville in Cannes, France, and the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art in Moscow. He also holds a Master of Architecture from the Technical University of Delft. Let us all give a warm round of applause to our guest speaker, Chris Van Damme.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Yes, good. Well, thank you for a very warm welcome. And I also have never seen the room so full as today, so that's very good. I saw that the schedule for today said something about a lecture of 40 minutes and questions. I will probably going to take a little bit longer, so but I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. I prepared a lecture today. For you, usually lectures have a theme, a subject. In this case, it was basically all up to me. And in discussion with the school here, I thought it was probably nicest to kind of try to show a lot of different projects, recent projects done here in Asia, but also try to make the link to other parts in the world. And give you, let's say, enough background to kind of position the project, but also to understand the approach that we took in these different projects and the typologies, etc., etc. So I tried to squeeze in a lot of different projects in limited time, anyway, afterwards I'm happy to explain you more in depth about the project if you have any questions. So please be seated, relax a bit, because it's going to be a long journey. Let's see if it works. Okay, so I chose pink today as a background, thought it was nice here. OMA, I'm not going to explain too much about the history of our office, but basically I want to just say OMA is doing architecture, is doing urban planning, is doing from small villa design to large projects. But that's our, let's say, our kind of what we're known for most. But we have our kind of alter ego is AMO. And AMO is just as important as OMA is. It's the part where we not work on actual physical projects, but it's also the part where we do the background research. Sometimes in relation to projects, but sometimes also independent researches. It can be branding, it can be development of content for exhibitions, it can be publications, it can be energy projects. So we do both, and I think it's just good to say that here, because pretty much everybody is trained as an architect, but architectural education and profession is actually very flexible, very versatile. We can use our kind of analytic thinking and our creative thinking in so many other domains than architecture only. Today I will, however, stay mainly with OMA projects, simply because they present best. I'm here this week, not as an architect, but as a tourist. I had never been in Manila. I actually had never been in the Philippines. And so I was interested in kind of getting to know much more about what's going on here in the Philippines, in Manila. We have no projects here, so I will also not present any projects for that matter. But yeah, so we've been driving around together with Bernice the last 4 days, try to get impressions, talk to people, and just enjoy. And I've really enjoyed my time so far in Manila. And let's say it was 3 days of kind of absorbing, receiving information. Today it's payback time. So I'm going to share with you some of the projects. Well, I prepared a bit before going. So what did I know about Manila? I knew it was very big. Actually, it's one of the major metropolitan areas in the world. And what's also fascinating is that actually Manila is one of the kind of largest growing metropolitan areas in the world. I mean, there's a lot of urbanization, expansion going on in many countries, but But Manila is really by far the biggest in this part of Asia, and still we have no work here. So I was a bit wondering why. We've been going around, and of course seeing all the obvious areas from Intramuros to Makati and so on. But what's very nice about the city, it has kind of so many sites. It has the kind of formal areas, the new areas, the CBDs, and it has the informal areas as well. And I think they're very important to kind of keep all these different identities together and kind of cherish them. So talking about Manila and about expansion, I think there's for you guys a lot of challenges in the future if you are still going to expand that much, 50% until 2050. And we have, of course, the climate change, and you're already hit so severely by so many typhoons. It will put a lot of challenges on new developments and master planning. And I want to kind of introduce some of our master plan ideas later to you. At the same time, it's not only the new areas, it's also the existing part of town. And usually, of course, the informal settlements are suffering most from these kind of changing conditions. And I think it's also, of course, a very kind of important challenge for you as planners and designers of the city. Now, I had expected the worst when I came to Manila, knowing let's say Manila is #1 in the world in worst traffic. I'm used to a lot, so I must say it's not as bad as I thought. I mean, it's much better. But I'm showing this because also there, if you increase with 50% and you densify the city, I mean, this is not going to be a lot better unless you really invest into different modes of transportation. And when you start thinking about planning cities, master planning, then I think most master plans are based on two things: car traffic and value of real estate. Those are the two hard factors, and I think they're both changing. And as those two are changing, the value of real estate as the absolute kind of driver of projects and car traffic, it poses challenges and at the same time opportunities, of course, in thinking of cities, how to develop. So much Manila. Now this is an image we have hundreds of them. This is a master plan in China. And I think master planning in China is the opposite of what you do in Manila. Because everything is carefully planned to the square centimeter before they begin with any work. So this is a master plan of a city. Shanghai, Chengdu, Beijing, Xi'an, Xiamen, it doesn't matter. It could be anywhere. And what is so great about this is that it's really a blueprint they have developed in China over the last decades. Where it's not just the physical planning of the city, the grids and the plots, but it's also the policy making, the financing, the governing, the developers. They're setting up developers, public, privates, to make this happen, and they do that all in a few years' time. In 5 years' time, they make the city for whatever, 1, 2, 3 million people. And it's really a blueprint that is optimized over all these decades, but also this one is fully and only driven by quantities. Traffic flow by car and real estate. But they have optimized it. So what you get are cities like this. Yeah? So great, you solve the issue of housing and offices and urbanization, so many people are still coming to the big cities. But the other thing is that because they're using the same blueprint, every city in China looks the same. You don't see whether you're in the north, south, east or west. And you can also wonder how, because they're usually very monofunctional, these plots, how sustainable are they in the coming 20, 30, 40 years? Will they still look or function the way, well, they do now, basically providing quick access to housing? And what do the next generations expect from these residential areas and these CBDs? So in other words, while this is a very kind of beautiful way of integrated planning, it also poses threats for the future. And while you have kind of concentrated planned areas and a kind of, I call it just an urban soup of informal city around it, this is the opposite, and I think there's things to learn from both. Yeah. Now also, traffic, as you said, traffic is changing significantly. I mean, many more modes of transportation, from the electrical scooters, sharing cars, etc., etc. Also, the other main driver, namely the value of real estate, is under threat, or actually it's collapsing as we speak. In China, the big developers are all on standstill. Evergrande needs to sell their stuff. And I think it's just a symbol of what's going on, because we have been focusing only on these drivers in terms of quantity. And if we design cities for the future, we have to change it. We have to redefine the drivers of designs. And I'm going to show you now some projects where we have been trying to implement it. Some of them are competitions, some of them are under construction, others not. But it doesn't matter, it's more for the kind of exercise. So this project is a competition we did in Chengdu during COVID in the 2020. When anyway, everybody was kind of rethinking cities of the future. What you see is this L shape, which is green, and around it you have a traditional Chinese master plan. And we were asked to create that L shape that was not built yet, because they wanted to have one, let's say, showcase of the future. So there was that opportunity to also rethink. And what we basically did, sorry, okay, off for a second. What we basically is kind of redefine the drivers of the project, because the existing master plan around it, it's a beautiful area outside of Chengdu with green hills, a lot of streams that together flow to the Yangtze River, all green. And the first thing they do in China is bulldozer everything flat. Take out the topography, change or kind of erase the green and the blue systems, and then do the tabula rasa. Put the grid for the cars, and then build these developer-driven blocks. We did it the other way around. We said we keep the topography, we analyze the green and the blue systems to understand how the water flows, what grows where, and on that basis, we define how much we can actually build. In other words, we were trying to kind of merge, let's say, the best of two worlds. On one hand, urbanity and intensity, because we still need concentration, of course. Without concentrations, all the countrysides will be urbanized, and public transport will not work. But at the same time, keep also the original green character of the surroundings. So what we took as an example is what they call the Linpan village, which is kind of an original village you can find in this area. It's a small village where there's a very close relationship between the people that live there and how they use the open space around their village. And this is a map we found from Chengdu, where you see all these dots. These are all Linpan villages in close harmony with its surroundings. And we thought that would be interesting to try. So what we did is, quite literally, create a series of clusters, 6 in total, in this L-shaped green space that we found. And each of those clusters is a cluster with a certain kind of main program, living, education, laboratory, but it's also all mixed-use villages. At the same time, the existing water system, for instance, we try to integrate and use. So we can use it for urban farming, we can use it for the laboratories, we can also have areas where we clean the water. So without disturbing the ecology, we were actually trying to turn it into a advantage. We also based the building topologies on it. Some of them were on a mountain, some of them were a bit more in the valley, etc., etc. And the combination of that plus the program then generates a series of different clusters and building types. The green space, is what we call the future garden. It's a combination of kind of preserving green space, but also reprogramming some of the agricultural lands in between. And again, create that link between the cluster and the open space. And this is how you see that each of the clusters has their own typology, their own combination of program. They all have residential, they all have work, they all have supermarkets, but the proportions shift. And the typologies also shift. Again, we need intensity and so it's not that we have only kind of villas, we do build tall buildings, but the way they are organized, the way they're structured, follows the logic of the topography. And these are some of the kind of, and it's master planning of course, we don't do the architecture of everything. We kind of sketch a potential. So that was the residential area. This is the laboratory area where we have a lot of the high-tech labs that are elevated above the ground. And we have we use the roofs for all the hydro farming. 6 different clusters. One of them is special, which is the kind of central cluster. It would be the first cluster to build. And it's on top of the train station. And that is the most public area. And what we did there is basically used fragments from all the other 5 and concentrated them in that circle. So this would be, let's say, the live laboratory of this area, where you see a fragment of the education, of the residential, of the labs, etc. And right on top of the train station, we have the TOD building. Usually those are the tall towers with no open space. We reversed it, it's all green space below, and we have a flat pancake hovering above it. So that was the project in Chengdu. We won the project, and then they decided that it was maybe a little bit too complicated for their blueprints to be integrated. So we now got 1 cluster, and all the other 5 are done by another office. Another project, that was a public project that's kind of initiated by the government. And in China, the government is planning and the developers are filling in. Well, this project is in Jakarta, it's the other way around. The public or the authorities are not planning, it's all left to the market. And in this case, we were asked by a developer to create a kind of a vision plan for them for the next 20 years. It's a very large area. I mean, Jakarta is of course a similar sized city like in Manila, similar tropical climate, big issues with traffic, the whole city is sinking. So there's kind of big issues in that city. The developer has acquired this whole piece of land to the northwest of Jakarta. All the area is called PIK. And the developer had already started building some of these areas. This is one, it's under construction. It's PIK 2, PIK 1 is already finished. And you see it's a bit of everything. It's a bit of CBD, it's a bit of housing, it's a bit of Disneyland actually. But they were developing these as standalone developments, not looking at what would then happen in the next phase. They would do things one by one. And after PIK 1 and after PIK 2, they figured out maybe we now have to kind of think what to do with PIK 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's going to take another 2 or 3 decades, but at least we should think about it. So that's where we were asked, and that was kind of quite interesting, of course. You see, the black and white parts are the ones that are already planned or being built, and 3, 6, and 4 and 5 are even further down. Are these fragmented areas in between the already developed areas, but also you see these kampungs in between. And the kampungs were not owned by them, and they were actually building a huge wall around them because they were afraid. So what you get is a series of very fragmented areas, all privatized. If you now look at the area, it's quite beautiful. Green, agricultural, the kampungs are actually quite nice. So in our search for what we could do for a developer who was purely interested in real estate value and selling the plots for as much as possible money, we were trying to make a vision and also a vision that is able to change over time, because market conditions change. So you also need to be able to adapt. One of the first things we had to define is how much of the area he will sell. And in the end, he defined that 75% of the total area he will sell to other developers. So 25% is left for infrastructure and left for green space. So basically, there was the driver of our design. We chose not to concentrate it, but to distribute it. And we distributed it as a kind of batik urban planning, creating a series of patches, each with their own autonomy, to over time adapt and change, but kind of bound together by this kind of continuous line. So we analyzed the existing green fields, also all the blue systems, and that basically generated that kind of potential grid where we kept as much as possible intact. And then the next step would be to see how this would work with the kind of minimum size of development area that the developer had in mind. And that's why we created this. So we had that kind of very kind of loose, organically shaped series of organic grids, each concentrated around let's say a center, and each also with their own identity, because they were anyway surrounded by one of the other developments or a kampung. These series of centers were kind of linked together through a boulevard, which also contained public transport. And this would be the image that you would then kind of get almost. You see that these patches with these different infills, different types of residential, because it would be almost all residential, and then the boulevard. And the boulevard would be then this kind of public and car transportation system that connects all the amenities, the sport facilities, the educational facilities, the shopping, etc., which would all be distributed over these different nodes. So the smallest element are these greenways. Those are the greenways. They separate basically these different developments, but they also combine existing green and blue systems, but also slow transport. So we have everywhere walkways, bicycle paths, let's say alternatives to the car system. Like in Manila, everybody basically typically takes the car. And then we have the Greenway Boulevard, which are then the main infrastructural systems that connect all the nodes and then also connect to the highway. And then these are these kind of central nodes. So it's a very different plan because it's also a very different condition. And as I said, it's all privatized. So this is a project which again is very different, but dealing with the same. Where I just showed projects that are about city expansion, which is in a way easier because there is simply not much built. This is a project which is about densification of existing cities, which is much more what we are dealing with in Europe. Because cities are not expanding, they're let's say, redeveloping areas in the city, but expansions are very rare, very small scale. This is an area in an abandoned or almost abandoned railway area in Milan. And what you see is actually the project. You see a very kind of large green space, and on the left side you see some colored buildings. And the colored buildings is the new real estate, but that was not the focus of the project. What we tried to do, and we collected a series of experts, is try to create let's say, define the critical mass for a park to function in such a way that it would cool the surrounding city with at least 3 degrees in summer. So how much green and water do you need in order for part of the park to reduce the heat in the city and also clean the air, purify the air? So that was the driver. And if you do that, you also, and from a kind of developer's point of view, upgrade the surroundings, and the real estate of the surrounding buildings, of course, goes up because the quality of air, etc., goes up. So it's a different way of thinking of, let's say, investing in a city and investing in real estate. And in this case, quality is driver, not quantity. It is a developer competition, and we won the competition. So it means there is also a change in mindset on the developer side, on the government side, to push kind of these kind of new urban developments. We sketched collages of how the contribution of green and blue could of course help, also as public spaces, and also the reuse of existing buildings was part of it. This is building startups for ecological companies integrated in the park. And I think that's also another kind of important part, is the kind of thinking about preservation of your city, of your buildings, which are not always per se monuments, but can be kind of very simple structures as well. Yeah, so in the end, what was left on the left side, that's what we said, that can be your GFA, that can be the floor area for your new buildings to the developer, but you first have to invest in the park. And at the moment we're developing a kind of further phasing plan for both the park and the buildings. So it's a small project, but I think it's significant because it means there is a kind of shift in mindset about drivers of planning, of city planning. We stay in Milan. I thought that was nice. Fondazione Prada, it's a museum that we've designed in Milan. But what is important to know is that Prada, this was not just the first project, it was a series of projects. We started our collaboration with Prada in 1999, and as a result we developed first two epicenters, two new type of stores. One is in New York and one is in LA. And the third one, which was never built, is in San Francisco. We developed not only architecture, we developed materials, products. On a Saturday afternoon I designed this phone for them, which was still in the Nokia period. And since then we do all the fashion shows for them. Since 2006 we do the fashion shows for Prada and Miu Miu for men and women. Which is for us great because it's a kind of laboratory. We can just in 3 weeks time make something, build it up, and 2 hours after the fashion show it's gone again. And the nice thing is that sometimes, you know, we can test one-to-one architectural ideas and implement it later. This was the last one. Now, another project that Prada, that in our collaboration was kind of pivotal, was this project. It's called the Transformer. It's in Salle, and Prada wanted to kind of open the market in Asia by having a kind of pop-up event in Salle. In the end, we had proposed to do one building here near the Royal Palace, but make a building with 4 floor plans. So these are 4 different shapes: a square, a hexagon, a cross, and a circle. And that means it's a building with potentially 4 different floor plans, and therefore also the opportunity to kind of transform the building. And we did that by simply kind of hooking the building up and rotating it like a dice. And every time we did that, we were able to introduce another event. So the first event was a fashion show on skirts, designed by Prada, contemporary art exhibition, a movie festival, and also a fashion academy show. That was the last one. So what I'm trying to say is that we have a client that we knew very well. We had already been working together since 8 years before we started this project. And they came to us and said, we have this industrial area in Milan. It's abandoned, we use it for storage. And we have an art collection in our foundation. And do you think that eventually this could have the potential to become a museum? And then they gave us carte blanche, like, you know, think about it and do something with it. So that was a great project. We designed this until its completion, which was in the first part in 2016 and the last part in 2018. So for more than almost 12 years we worked on this project. So this was the final result, and I'm not going to explain the entire project to you because it's already an old project. But I just want to explain something about working with existing contexts and existing buildings, even when they are not precious. None of these buildings were listed. They were just industrial buildings. They had no listing whatsoever. But working with existing building is extremely rewarding because you're interacting with an existing structure. You basically start painting on an existing canvas. What you see, 10 existing buildings, and we introduced 2 new buildings, the tower and the museum. And the tower I will explain later because that was completed much later and never got so much published as the rest. So the red red square is the museum. It's an aluminum box. Then the stage was a, let's say, rebuilt, so new building, but looked like existing. And then we had the tower, which was put on a location where we demolished a small structure. The project is not, and I think that's important to understand. Usually when projects with existing buildings are about the contrast between old and new. You keep the old, and you build something new. And then it's about contrasting. In our case, we wanted to basically use the whole spectrum from new, and old, and also make old buildings look new buildings look old, and basically every nuance. In other words, we didn't want to be consistent. We didn't want to be, let's say, conceptual or about it. But we tried to create one project out of all these different buildings with different techniques. The other thing also is that the inside-outside relation was very important. We tried to kind of make a lot of transition spaces between the two. What you see here is a master plan of the site with a few axes, and I want to explain a few of them so you know when I say that there is a strong relation between old and new. First, when you come in, there's the gate. You come in here, you don't have to buy a ticket. Basically, the city continues through the compound. First thing you see is the exhibition. You don't have to pay for it. You just kind of see it. And it's all glass, it's all transparent. And you basically see already through the building what's behind it, the buildings behind it. Or you turn around the corner, go to the back, go around the gold building and buy a ticket. When you buy a ticket, and you have to see that that's the aluminum building, it's elevated. It's kind of very thick floor plates, 120. That's because also all the existing buildings, as it was a kind of logistical building, were elevated for the trucks to dock. No? Once you're in, you are elevated, and you basically look over all the people standing outside, and you're on that kind of eye-level relation with the surrounding existing buildings. And that's when your journey begins. Inside, outside, old, new. You see those roof tiles? That's reconstructed. It's not old, looks old. The gold looks new, but actually it's the thinnest possible veneer done on an existing building without any changes. So we're also, playing with perception of old and new. And this is where you see old and new old very nice together. And you see also those 3 arched windows. Those were filled. We only discovered them when we started working on them, and we kind of liked them. They were kind of very monumental. So what we did, and now you look at that red axis, those 3 windows we projected into the new building, into the new museum building. So when you, let's say now you're standing with your back to those windows, when you then look into the museum, you see those 3 arches projected in, and they include the elevator cabin and the egress staircase. Yeah? And one step further to the kind of glass facade, again these 3 arches. Now they become monumental egress routes or ceremonial entrances, however you use it. So it's a way to kind of quote little details of existing buildings and combine old and new. In the other direction, on the left side you see the new museum with the glass facade I just showed you, and you see 3 other buildings, all existing. And what we did is we kind of projected the entire glass facade onto the existing building. Existing building was chopped off because one part was crooked, one was good. We kept the good parts, the crooked part we killed, and there we put this mirror facade. but you also see that outline, and that outline reflects the glass facade on the building to the left, which can be fully opened. We also projected that to the third and the fourth building. So what you see is that these facades can open, and events can kind of link from one building to the other one, from old to new, from inside to outside. And for instance, dance performances take place, and they basically occupy the entire compound. So it's not about buildings, it's about, say, making it one development. So this is a part of this big door that can open, and then you can see through to the buildings behind. So visual relationships, and again, they're even. The building I wanted to highlight is this building, because it was the last part, the last building that got completed. It was also the most difficult one to build. So the museum already opened in 2016, this building only after 2018. It's called Tower, very simple. It's all white concrete, and it's the only building that's vertical in this museum. It's also the only building that is not looking into the compound, but outwards. It faces the old city center with the old dome in the center of Milan. Initially, what we wanted to do is make a building that would basically be extended every year with one floor, and every year ask an artist to make an installation specifically for that floor. But there were too many practical reasons why that didn't work, of course. So in the end, we built a building with 10 floors, 10 gallery spaces. And those gallery spaces are for, let's say, bespoke art installations that were made for the Fondazione already in the past. What we wanted to do is still, and I think that's also a story in the entire project, create variety. Usually arts, museums, what do museums like? They like total neutrality. White boxes, 4 white walls, you can hang paintings, control daylight, if at all, or the industrial space. Well, we have plenty of industrial spaces here. We have white spaces, but we did not want to generate the same condition everywhere, rather having very different conditions. So there's always, let's say, an ideal condition for every piece of art. A different type of flexibility. In this project, we have 10 gallery spaces, 10 floors, and we decided to design this building with 3 parameters, and 3 only. Everything is in white concrete, but what makes it different is we have 2 floor plans. The existing site is this triangle. So the lowest floors are simply an extrusion of the triangle. But above a certain height, we could cantilever over the roads. So we made this rectangle. So we have triangle, rectangle, triangle, rectangle. And we have an increase of height. We start with 2.7 meters. It's for the toilets, you don't need more. And then gradually, further you go up, you have more heights, you have more light, you have more view. So generosity goes up. And the third principle is a structural principle, but also a principle of daylight control. The long facade is either closed or open. It's either concrete, and then it's structural, or open, and then you have glass and no columns. So it's a stacking system. And if you combine these 3, then you get this kind of sculptural effect. You see the increase of height, you see the orientation of the glass alternating to the long and the short facades, and you also see open and closed, and you understand the structural principle of each of these floors. And it's facing to the city center, so it's the display window of the foundation. And this is how it's facing to the courtyard. Very sober, very kind of pure. And this is from the other side, from the street corner. Very dynamic. And this is from the back, because it's lining out with this kind of large building, which is called the magazine. And then when you zoom in, you see that kind of diagonal part. That diagonal part is structural because the building is cantilevering over the streets. It has a very small footprint, so it would basically tumble down. So we had to pull it back. So we have this kind of white concrete space that is tying it back. And then you see, as a kind of shadow reflection on the white wall, this window. And that window brings daylight into the staircases in the core. And this is then that window and the core. main circulation for people is to kind of go up, elevator, and then walk down by the staircase. And when you then zoom in between the window and that white concrete, you see that there is the space for the elevator. We have a giant elevator, 3 by 5 meters, a car fits in. And that's the elevator for the art, but also for people. And this is how they together merge with the existing building, both the structural wall and also the elevator shaft. And this is the elevator. It's a red natural stone, partly a panorama elevator. And from here you directly enter into the gallery space. This is one of the lower gallery spaces, triangular shape, low. I think it's 3.2 meters. This is one higher, with a opaque wall facing the city center, and the glass facade faces the compound. And this is again 2 levels further up, the rectangular plan and an increase in height. So you see all these little parameters create a kind of nice variety of spaces. And this is then, let's say, a picture taking at the end of the day. That was Milan, kind of, let's say, various project to work on because there was so much going on. This is a project, also a preservation project in the US. I show it to you because it's again a very different context. It's a logistics center for US mail. It's not a very beautiful building, not at all, but it's listed. We were not allowed to make any big changes to the facades. The good thing is, very good connection to the CBD, to the infrastructure. But the client didn't really know what to do with it. So, in the end, we decided to make it a kind of mixed-use project. And this is the kind of the inside. I mean, in the inside you can do whatever you want. It's just a series of concrete columns. So what we decided is to kind of make a series of atriums. Carve out an atrium space, link that to the city, and make that atrium the entrance for the different program. And you see culture, food, work and play. So there is performance space, big music concerts, there's co-working, there is a food market, and there is a smaller cultural program on the other side. And in each of those atriums, we added in one staircase, leading from the ground floor to the rooftop and the kind of mid-level. And that was the kind of basically our only contribution to the project. So very limited, very focused. Well, again, the 3 different stairs and the different layouts, and then the rooftop, which makes this a kind of almost 24-hour cycle. Because if people working there, in the evening they go there for dinner, or at night they're going to have parties and raves there. The different staircases, this is the food market, and this is the zigzag at the culture area. And also there we host small events in the evening. So small atrium, single staircase, that does the job basically. And this is how you see from above those staircases projected through these roofs and the kind of roof garden. It is used during the day for people, and in the morning you have these kind of yoga classes, and everybody just does their crane bird on the roof. That was preservation. Well, one of the projects, the typology of project we enjoy a lot, of course, are public buildings. This is a project we completed roughly a year ago. It's in Taipei, and it's a theater building. Actually, it's 3 theaters. Here you can see it best. We have 3 seated halls that are injected into this cube in the center. And what is special about this is it basically redefines let's say, the typical solution for theaters. The typical theater is a giant roof, and under the roof you have different halls, and in between you have the foyer spaces. And what is most memorable about going to the theater? That's the seated space. That's the kind of ceremonial space that is usually hidden somehow far away from the facade. In our case, we wanted to link it to the surroundings, to the streets, to the public space. So when you go in the evening to the Globe Theater, you can more or less now already kind of see where you're going to sit. The celebration is in the streets. the nice thing also is that this project, on the one hand, it's very absolute, but it does two things. It somehow magically merges with the kind of informal surroundings, because there's also the night market there, in a kind of interesting way. And at other moments, it can be very ceremonial and grand by itself. And in the evening, that cube basically dissolves into a series of areas with different colors relate to the different program, back of house, front of house, artist spaces, and it's kind of one big buzzing block with activity. What makes this also special, and I think that fits well to the culture in Taipei, where there is really the culture of experimental theater, is that these three theaters have different qualities, different conditions. And they can be used in the evening in parallel. They all have their own show, the stages are all operating independently. But there's also this one scenario, which is something that, let's say, we provided but was not asked for in the competition brief, is where those three theaters are actually opening their stages. So there is one central stage, and all these three seated areas can join the same performance, because they're kind of linked at the same level. So this is the globe interior, and that's when you sit, when you see the stage. It's a proscenium stage. This is the grand theater. And this is where you see the stages connected. So they already did some performances that were specifically made for this building. And with a little bit more audience. So it's the two elements, the cube and the seated areas. And the cube is also interesting because it combines both back of house, all the stage equipment, but also all the front of house circulation and the rehearsal spaces. And inside the building, it's possible to kind of take that route through the building from the ground floor all the way up to the roof. So when you, as a tourist or as a visitor, go in there, you kind of see pretty much all sides, all aspects of theater making. So the entrance at the ground floor, the building is elevated up, so the night market can continue underneath. This is on level where where there's access to the three theaters, each with their own escalator. This is underneath the Globe Theater, where you can continue your tour, passing by rehearsal spaces, passing by a restaurant with a roof garden, and to the rooftop terrace, which is also public. So that's one way how we try to integrate city, public space, publicness into a theater. And at the same time, and that's of course what is exciting, is try to see, can you innovate a typology, innovate the typology of theater making in a clever way. And that's why I want to show you this project. This project, I've never shown it before. It's not on our website because it's we're not allowed to yet. So please don't put it on social media. It's another performance center, and it's basically the opposite of what we've been doing in Taipei, which makes it interesting. The brief here was different. They wanted to have one performance space, one seated space for both concerts, so music, but also theater, opera and dance, and for 2,000 seats. And that's very tricky because if you look at theater versus concert, those are opposite type of performances. Concert is for the ear. The room acoustics is important. The orchestra has to sit inside the space. Theater is for the eye. Proximity, view lines is important. And the stage is huge machinery that is disconnected from the theater, or from the seated area. So if you look at the plans, a performance hall, single space, acoustically well developed. Theater is the opposite. Actually, the backstage part is larger than the seated part. And then the 2,000 seats makes it also really critical, because from that moment on you start to, let's say, tend to be too far away from the stage to really have the ideal view. So our project basically contains two elements. It's a bowl on the outside, and an auditorium. And what we did is that auditorium is a circular element right in the center of the project. And in that bowl, the bowl is basically a soup with all kinds of other kind of backstage facilities, front of house facilities that are mixed. So it's really literally the reverse of the Taiwan project. The trick here is that what we say, like, if we don't believe that we can kind of change the inside of the space well enough, so in that case we just have to do a larger transformation. And we chose to say that the seated part is basically rotating elements that can dock on either to a perfect stage condition, stages, backstages, all the actor spaces, or to a concert stage, and then form one whole instead of this kind of separated condition. If you do that, you almost automatically see that there are still two settings available, and basically then we said, well, then we can also basically provide two other modes. One being a water stage, opening up literally, physically, and the other one for a mega event for many more people than 2,000. If we anyway rotate, then let's take advantage of the situation. So that's the opera stage. Sorry, the water stage. There was the opera is theater. This is the concert stage, and the mega event stage. So the thing can rotate 360 degree, and depending on its kind of location, you can also see it from the outside because we have this huge screen on top that rotates with it. That concept we liked, but then it was still a question like how to make it into a credible building, because it has this kind of very interesting condition. Namely, you see this whole boulevard is full of cultural highlights. And the nicest one, and the one finished to date, is the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. Now you know where it is. And then there's going to be the Guggenheim, and there's some other museums. And right in the center you have the bridge, and that's to downtown Abu Dhabi. So when you arrive from below, you'll have that glance to the Louvre on the left side, and you see on the right side then the theater. So we thought, let's take a closer look at the Louvre. We kind of measured it. It's 180 meters exactly. And we thought if you anyway cross that bridge, you want to have a kind of nice balanced relationship between the two sides, the theater side on the right and the museum side on the left. So what we then basically did is to borrow from Jean Nouvel his bowl and basically put it upside down. So we took the exact same section, the exact same dimension, and then we put our rotating element in the center, and voila, that's when you have a theater. So how does it work? You arrive from the esplanade, and when you esplanade, you already see that wooden element in the middle, which is the kind of rotating auditorium. This is the entrance hall. You can decide to circulate up to smaller performance spaces, rehearsal spaces, but you see that rotating element in the center. And then when you kind of enter, then this is the kind of opera setting, looking backwards. So opera, theater, you have the stage, the backstage, the side stage, everything is there, perfect infrastructure. And then when you rotate 180 degrees, you have the orchestra. And you also have the possibility for view, because music can handle view, theater not. And we rotate those elements inside the walls. So from a lot of absorption, you get reflection. So you can adjust the acoustics while you rotate the building. If you rotate 90 degrees back, you have the water performance, which is nice because then you have also this possibility of having a stage with all those boats around it. And where you have the entrance, that's a kind of a gradual slope. It's where you can have also these kind of extra large scale events, seated area, standing area, and that's where you can have those big parties with 10,000 people. So, a very different way of working with theater and kind of developing typologies. There is a fifth theater, which is the rooftop. We made it accessible. It's a gentle slope, and in the center we have that large screen that can either reflect what's happening inside the building or just have its own screening with the skyline of Abu Dhabi on the background. Yeah, so yeah, we didn't win it. I don't know why, but it happens. Now, that was cultural building. Now I want to show you a project that we completed also during COVID. It's called Axel Springer in Berlin. It's a project, it's a headquarter building for a media company. What's nice about this project is that it's a project that I can explain perhaps in 10 different ways. And every different, let's say, subject is a layer. And the nice thing is that once you know it, you kind of realize it looks like the building kind of belongs here. It was always here. Let's start at the beginning. Let's from a kind of business perspective. It's a media industry. The media industry is transforming rapidly. This gold building is the original headquarters of this company, Springer. They have these kind of newspapers, these kind of boulevard papers. They had their own printing next door. So this is the traditional newspaper journalism type of company. Now, what happened in the years before the competition was in 2012, is that digital media was catching up with printed media. Actually, you see in a period of 4 years, it was catching up from not even 10% to being 50-50. And you can imagine that those lines only kind of continued. So, well, printed media is down, multimedia goes up. And the CEO understood that as this happens, he needs to make a culture change in his company. Because what he has is a lot of these cigar-smoking men being the journalists, and they really had a kind of old-fashioned journalist club in that building. But the reality is that these are the people that make the money for their company. And they are not the cigar-smoking people sitting behind the typewriter in this Salle office. So, if you want to change the culture, you have to look at your users and find a way how that energy that they have is reflected in the building. That was the driver of the project. That's the CEO, Duijn. And obviously what all these companies do is they point at Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is the kind of magical thing where everything turns into gold. At the same time, he says, well, we are German, so we need some kind of decent Germanness, yeah, something serious. We're not these funny guys only. And I think that ambiguity we try to keep also in this project. When you look at Silicon Valley, I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you go out there, I mean, the first impression, of course, this is Silicon Valley. There is nothing magic about the way Silicon Valley was planned. It's because of a total absence of planning that it's successful. So planning Silicon Valley is a bit of a paradox. However, if you talk to the companies, talk to the people that work there, the research that is done there, you see that there's a few things that always come up. I mean, physical presence, proximity, everything should be real, so no PowerPoints, but let's say, and it's this anthill. Everybody is close together. Everybody who's relevant from the different companies, they know where to find each other. So can we create this kind of anthill in Berlin, make this the Berlin Silicon Valley? Well, when we started, we took the valley very serious. So we took a piece of blue foam and kind of carved out this valley. And because it didn't generate enough square meters, we basically made two valleys and turned them upside down. And what you then get is this kind of central atrium space in the middle. Usually, atrium spaces in office buildings are circulation areas or places for coffee drinking or kind of lobbies where you enter. This atrium is different. Because we were designing this as a building for more than 40 different companies, every square meter is to be rented out. So every part in the atrium space is actual office square meters with the same square meter price as any other office part. And that was really challenging because as a kind of very still old-fashioned company, they also have a very rigid thinking on what an office could do or should do. Anyway, we saw the opportunity, all these different entities within this Springer group to kind of work together and to take advantage of each other's presence, the synergy that it could create. also interesting if you, let's say, look at innovations and where they happen and when they happen, then they rarely happen in a meeting room or behind a desk. They happen in, let's say, like informal chance encounters. And what we can do as architects, of course, is to make a building that promotes that does not only have desk spaces in meeting rooms, but also creates these informal areas where people can meet, do meet, or meet in different conditions. So every unit in this project has what you see, 80% formal space, like office, corridor, cell office, if they want to. But they also all have a part in the atrium, that's the informal office. And with that they can choose where they work, but they all have the opportunity for informal office and more formal office. Now this is the atrium. This is the atrium just after COVID. That's when we sent our photographer. It's not very busy yet, but you see that all these companies work there. They have their desks, their work tables, informal or formal. It's not only there for coffee drinking. And what you also see during COVID is that people kind of had to come to the office. It was not because they were checking their emails, but because they were, let's say, discussing, brainstorming. And then they all preferred to work on the terraces instead of in their closed meeting rooms, also because it felt much more open air, much more COVID friendly. So yeah, some of the views you get through the project. This was a visitor passing by. Okay, so that's from a kind of business perspective. If you for a moment look at the building not from a kind of the void as this kind of synergetic element, but from a historical perspective, then it's very interesting because it's in Berlin. And it's not just in Berlin, it's the red spot. And the red spot is exactly on the wall that was dividing East and West Berlin. And what's happening in Berlin now is that everywhere where that wall was, they have kind of taken it down. And wherever they've taken it down, they have kind of filled the gap. They basically erase history as if it was never there. Well, I have to go back one step. This is Axel Springer, that's the guy himself, who believed after World War II, under the fascism regime, very much in freedom. And being so close to the communist sides, he was very much against anything that was kind of absolute regime. So he was a kind of fighter for free democracy. And what he then did was build a gold-colored building right next to the wall, which was of course an absolute provocation to the, let's say, DDR on the other side, where everything was grey and everything was poor, and he was kind of this capitalist guy making a gold shiny building facing the poor East Germany. At least that was how it worked. What immediately happened is that on the DDR side, they built big tower flats around it, so that only the kind of people that lived there had a good view, but those were the party people, and other people in the DDR could not see the gold building from the east side. Anyway, this is the site. So here you see really the green part is the death zone, that's how it was called. The wall was there, but also the minefields, and that's also where you see the red outline, that is our site. And you see that the diagonal of our void is literally following that line. So we wanted to demark that void, the void that has been there now since the wall collapsed. We wanted the void to be still remain visible as part of Berlin's history. So when you pass by, you see the void, and this is referring to the wall, to the death zone. And this is, you can see the beginning and the end, and you understand that it was diagonally crossing the site. But it goes further. East and west, we took very literal. So inside the building, you see that there's a top and a bottom, but there's an east and a west. So we gave slightly different material and color scheme. The floor in east, sober, grey, because everything is grey. And then on the west, slightly more luxurious and capitalist green. The colors of the columns, black versus white. So you always know where you are as a company. But also in the furniture. We have the Mies van der Rohe in the west, and we found this DDR counterpart, Rudolf Horn, who has an almost similar design for the chair, but just different. It was out of production, we kind of brought it back in production again for this project. And the same for the simple chairs. We have the Maarten van Severen in the west, and we found this beautiful wooden plywood chair from Menzel in the 1950s from the east. So depending where you sit, in which side of the building, your furniture also is either east or west. The only thing that connects it is the press floor. We have the media floor for the newspaper and the television. And also that is more or less symbolic because also our press is of course always biased, always colored, being from the east or the west or wherever in the world. We wanted it to be neutral and basically bridge both sides. So this is the kind of the media room in that reflective mirror material. So that's the kind of history of Berlin, but also from an architectural perspective the building is interesting. You see it's two blocks, two black blocks separated by this gap in the center. And these blocks, these heights come from somewhere because this is the typical Berlin Traufhöhe, I would call it. It's kind of basically the datum of the floor of the roof. And that for years has been absolute. You were not allowed to go above it, only with setbacks. And it all has to do with the monumental historical past of Berlin. Everything is monumental, heavy, stone with punched windows, but everything is kind of, heavy and serious. It's a very serious country, Germany. Anyway, we took the Traufhöhe and basically the only thing we did is basically have two buildings with that same height, but stack it on top of each other. But we still wanted them to read that datum heights. To also make connection with the local surroundings. And at the same time, while Berlin has that past with this kind of monumental emperor, as it was before the First World War, and of course the relation with East and West, there is also Berlin as a place where innovations were made, where architectural breakthroughs happened. This is the design, Mies van der Rohe, for the first skyscraper as we know it. It's not only an elevator with a steel skeleton, it was also the first design with a curtain wall. Well, Mies van der Rohe didn't win, he had to flee, escape to the US. But this was the Friedrichstraße design, and you see this beautiful charcoal painting. It's actually 2 blocks away from where the building is. So in our project we wanted to basically memorize or celebrate also this part of architectural history. And what we took is we took literally that charcoal drawing and projected it on the glass. And that's on the one hand a reference, bowing for Mies. On the other hand, with the silk screening on the outside, we could also control the solar heat gain inside the building. So we took black glass, which already looks very heavy, referring to the heavy German past. It helps to reduce the heat gain, but then with the frit we were able to really kind of tune it to get to the numbers that we wanted it to be, while at the same time it is extremely creating a lot of daylight still, of course. So we did a lot of tests with different fritting, trying to find a balance between inside and outside. From the inside you hardly see it, depending on the sunset. And on the outside it was, let's say, visible enough for it to be seen. And this is from the inside when the sun is maybe coming from the kind of wrong direction. So it's another way of standing and describing the Springer building. Here you see it in the context. You read very well that Traufhöhe, that's the datum line that relates also to the neighboring blocks, and the opening where the wall was. And you always get a glance into the atrium where you see the people working. So this is the different corners, and in a way, although it's a monster, the building, it tries to be kind of subtle. So you see again this kind of sandstone building, and then we had this kind of gold clad facades, breaking it up into smaller elements. So the building in the smaller street is not as present as on the larger streets. The gold, again, with the golden building of the Springer building in the back. So also here we try to kind of make references to local moments. A Mendelssohn corner, this is a Mendelssohn building on the right side, and then our kind of setback and tweaking of the volume. So this is the Springer building. Media company headquarters. Well, I want to show you also some recent stuff. This is a building which is nearing its completion. That should be in the coming months. It's a headquarter for a company in China, Xiamen. What's interesting is the location. It's part of a new CBD, and it's part of this kind of mountain range that is basically separating two halves of the CBD. And what we try to do is to create a building that kind of relates to that topography quite literally, as if a kind of a tower is emerging from that mountainscape. So this is zooming in. At the same time, also we had to kind of comply to all the rules and regulations. You have usually the podium, maximum, minimum setbacks for podium and tower, and that what you usually get is on the left side, a low podium and then a tower. And towers are a very anti-urbanistic typology. They don't really contribute a lot to the surroundings usually. So one of the things we often try to do is to kind of challenge that podium tower, and in this case try to make simply a more interesting sculpture that also opens up to the sidewalk from this combination. So that's the kind of unified volume you see on the right side. And this is from passing by. And there is a slight link to the kind of very local Minnan architecture, where all the windows have these kind of these bars, basically, these kind of linear lines. So we gave it a kind of graphical twist in that sense. Also here we had a kind of maximum openness. There was a ratio given by the government of open, closed, that we had to comply to. Inside those white boxes we have the operable elements. So the glass, we don't need to make further openings in there. And we used for this material porcelain, because it's a company producing bathroom appliances, so they have a lot of sinks and toilets, and it's all white porcelain. So we used our own material to clad this facade. So that's this. That's one building that's almost completed. Then this is another one which is also almost completed. It's in Hangzhou. Hangzhou, a city close to Shanghai. One of the nicest cities in China, they say. And because it's a moderate climate, but it's quite wet. So this is located in an area called the Future Tech City, and that's one of those many Silicon Valleys in China, where the big companies, Alibaba and Tencent and Vivo and Oppo and all those companies, they go to, and then they have their kind of research institutes there. So it's really this innovation industry that they're promoting actively through planning in China. This is right in the middle of it, and it's a combination of residential and offices, but it's mainly for the young professionals that live there. Our client gave us this as a brief. We want 2 small towers,